Welcome back to the Fanspeak Network, and we are starting a new series now that the 2025 Big Board is here. Best Ball is back. We're super excited. I'm, of course, joined by my brother, Steve, and every single week we are going to go through different rookie positions and talk through kind of Steve's rankings for the rookies and how that context applies to the Big Board, how much he's drafting these rookies in the Big Board. And today we are talking quarterbacks and tight ends. So Steve, how are you doing? I know you're sick and under the weather, but we're going to power through. Today we're going to talk quarterbacks and tight ends. How do you feel about these classes, like from a broad scope? And then we'll get into it.
Yeah, so I'm doing well, thank you, and very much enjoying getting back to drafting for a season long. Big board. Obviously had a lot of success last year. Hoping to run it back this year. And I've always loved the NFL draft and rookies, so this is definitely something I'm very passionate about and into. As to what these classes are, we were no doubt spoiled last year with the quarterback class. Definitely one of the top three or four classes of the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously has a very, very bright future. This class is, the chance that any class is going to hold up to that is slim. And this class definitely does not. But that doesn't mean that this class is devoid of people to draft at the quarterback position. And, we've seen even, like we know a couple of these guys are very likely to have clear starting paths. And we've seen that pay off. I mean, a couple of years ago, Mac Jones started a good chunk of his rookie year and had some decent fantasy games. Is he a good NFL quarterback? No, but he started and he produced. And we've seen that in other lesser classes as well. So when we're needing, likely wanting three quarterbacks and two of the starters, or at least two starters are here, yeah, we need to have some interest.
Sure. Okay. That helps contextualize it for me. I think context is important. Again, this is not last year's quarterback class, and that's important to know. This is a very strong tight end class, and we'll get into that, obviously highlighted by Tyler Warren, who was our poster boy here. But I have to say, Steve's being modest. He finished in 4th place in the 2024 Big Board rookies. Scouting are his thing. He had covered the Senior Bowl for 9 years, 2012 to 2020. We just shared some pictures of that on Twitter as like a throwback. But no, he's always studied rookies, and he still studies rookies. And he has helped me identify the rookies I want to stay away from, the rookies I want to target. Last year was Ladd McConkey, Brian Thomas Jr., obviously, because last year was loaded at receiver. And, this year's loaded at running back and tight end. And so I think it's good to know where the strengths are, who to stay away from, who to target. And that's what this series is going to do. So we're going to go position by position to go through Steve's rankings that'll help you in the big board drafts. And then once the NFL draft's over and the BBM and all the classic and contests are released, we'll do it all over again based on Steve's rookie rankings as it pertains to where they landed. Obviously, a guy like Ladd McConkey had an amazing landing spot. We kind of knew, he's going to be the wide receiver one. So, we'll do that all over again. But let's start now. I'm going to bring over, you did an article on fanspeak.com. Let me see there. You did an article on fanspeak.com, and you're going to do it for the other positions too, actually ranking your each position group. And some of these guys you may not actually draft, especially in the quarterback and tight end position. So we can go through those quickly, but we're going to quickly talk about each of these guys so that you can, again, as viewers, hopefully it's helped you find this a useful exercise so you can use it as you're doing your big board draft. So let's get right to it, Steve. Let's start at the quarterback position, and let's first talk about the two that are most likely going to go in the top 5, and that's Cam Ward from Miami and Shedeur Sanders from Colorado.
Yes, and I think Ward and Sanders are likely to be the top 2 quarterbacks. There's some chance that somebody else unseats them, but right now that's what it's looking like. Ward is probably the top quarterback, but again, Sanders is still in the mix, and Sanders coming from NFL bloodlines, that could just help his case as well. But I mentioned this in the article, and to an extent, Ward and Sanders are a little reminiscent of the class 2 years ago,
Mm,
where 1-2 it went Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, and those were two quarterbacks who were not perfect prospects and not guys who were going to have a big rushing
mm.
advantage as well. And that's kind of what Ward and Sanders are. Neither are big runners. Both might add a few hundred yards, touchdown here or there, running the ball, but they're going to have to produce fantasy wise for you with their arms.
And that's why we're
And
seeing them at the end of drafts
yeah,
too.
and
Yeah.
and and neither one of these guys are Joe Burrow, who
Yeah.
or Justin Herbert.
Justin Herbert. Yeah.
Um, so, but both are likely to be, taken in the top 5, 6 picks, and will probably be full-time starters. They'll probably just going to be handed the keys and given the opportunity to start. Ward started at Incarnate Ward College, and then did 2 years at Washington State. Then this past year at Miami, really elevated his game at Miami, and also faced tougher competition, generally speaking, at Miami. So that was good to see as well. Um, Miami didn't have much of a defense, so he had to throw the ball a lot, and he did extremely well. I mean, he put up just massive numbers, carried that team, carried that offense considerably. Uh, and I do kind of like him to C.J. Stroud, just a gunslinger, can really, good arm, not elite, but good arm. He at times can, make some bad decisions with the football. And that's what we should expect from all rookies. But where he's going as like kind of like QB 18, 19, 20 in drafts, I don't mind, because I absolutely could see him kind of producing at that level. Um, landing spot will kind of be a deciding factor, when it's all said and done, like which of these two quarterbacks I like the most, because I think they're very similar.
Mm,
Sanders doesn't have as good of an arm strength as Ward, but he can be very accurate. He's very smart with his decision making. His biggest problem is he holds onto the ball too long. He takes a
mm,
ton of sacks. That's just going
mm.
to get ramped up in the NFL level, especially with more complex blitzes and stuff like that. But I do like Sanders. He has developed every year from Jackson State to Colorado these past 2 years. Um, and the NFL bloodlines, he's got a lot of confidence. Uh, and I mentioned this in the article, reminds me of Jane Daniels. He goes out there and he seems unfazed. I mean, this guy
Mm.
had these last 2 years, multiple overtime games, last second drives where no moment seems too big for him.
Yeah.
And you love seeing that, because that is a trait that you look at all the greats. I don't care if they're drafted first overall, like a Joe Burrow, middle of the first round, like a Patrick Mahomes, or, sixth round, like a Tom Brady.
Yeah.
They are unflappable in these situations. So that is a trait that he has, and also why I think he's going to start as a rookie, pretty much no matter what. Um, he's kind of going in the same area, so you're kind of making a decision who you like more. If you're doing a lot of these big board drafts, I'd take a share of both. I wouldn't necessarily be overweight on either one, but
Mm.
I'm going to have a share of both. And then I do think the landing spot could could matter. If somebody's with a better offense coordinator, somebody's with better weapons around them, that's going to play a factor for sure. Um,
So if you were doing, since these are the two that are going to, we'll talk about the other ones
yeah,
briefly, but since these are the two that we know are going to be likely drafted in the top 5, likely are going to start this year for all or most of the year. If you were doing 150 big board drafts,
yeah.
or would you say you'd be with the field with both of these guys, like 8% on both of them? Is that how you're handling it? Like you don't want to be overweight, but you
Yeah.
want a little exposure, or slightly underweight maybe to these
So I
guys?
think I will say, I think in general with these big board drafts, because so much of the bottom of the quarterback class is uncertain, and that's the other thing that these guys have going for them. We kind of know they're going to start. There's a lot of quarterbacks behind them that there's a probably good chance that Kirk Cousins, Russell Wilson, maybe Justin Fields, Derek Carr, Aaron Rodgers. There's probably a good chance these guys are going to still be starters, but there's some retirement concerns. Maybe somebody has to sign on as a backup somewhere. So maybe not all those guys are starting. These two, I can actually say we have a better confidence that they're like 98% can be 4-year starters. So
Mm.
that is good to know. In general, I'm probably going to have I'm going to do a lot of 2 quarterbacks higher and then maybe one later. So that's maybe starting with these guys. Maybe one of those guys I just mentioned who's a little bit more uncertain. So it depends. I'll probably be between 6 and 8% on these guys. So
Mhm.
at the field, not over the field, but
Right.
around the field, I'm fine with.
Okay, that just helps bring a little context. So I think that helps. So let's quickly go through the other guys because I don't think you want a ton of them. You've got Jalen Moreau from Alabama, Jackson Dart number 4, and Quinn Ewers. Quinn Ewers number 5, and Will Howard number
Yeah.
6. You can kind of lump them all together. I know Jackson Dart. We're taping this the Thursday night of Senior Bowl week. Has been getting a lot of buzz down at the Senior Bowl. Do you think it goes Dart then Milrow or Milrow then Dart in the real NFL draft? Do you think either pop into the actual real NFL draft first round?
So here's the thing, like leading into the Senior Bowl, a lot of people, and Milrow's down there also, and he's struggling some.
Okay.
Is people were wondering if Milrow had a good showing, could he be a late first rounder? And that would be obviously interesting for him. He's a raw physical talent. He's the best runner in this class. He's got one of the strongest arms in this class, but he does not have accuracy. He doesn't throw with consistency. Even when he's running, he doesn't do a great job of like looking to throw or anything like that. He can take sacks, and he'll definitely take more at the NFL level. He
You
reminds
wrote
me
think Anthony Richardson, but maybe
think
more
Anthony
rounded.
Richardson. Honestly, another like similar Alabama player would be Jalen Hurts. And now Hurts went a 5th year, unlike Milrow, who came out early. And also his rookie year, he started the last 3 games of the year. He was not a full-time starter.
Right.
He was a 2nd-round pick, and that could be Milrow's future.
Yeah.
But the fantasy upside, and Hurts had at least one, if not 2, really good fantasy weeks of those 3 games because he won.
Yeah.
And that could be Milrow. But if he's not starting, you could be hurting. So from how I'm handling him, like definitely end of drafts, definitely I want to make sure I have 2 really strong quarterbacks ahead of him that I feel very confident in.
Okay.
I don't want to be taking guys like the Cousins, the Cars, et cetera, where not only do I not know if they're starting, I don't know where they're landing. I want to have 2 clear starters ahead of them. But if I have a couple percentage points of Milrow is my 19th, 20th round pick, so be it, because even if he gets half a year, 6 games, he could have some spike weeks. Dart is kind of similar, much better passer, actually doing pretty well down at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, I've seen a lot.
He very well could be jumping Milrow and maybe sneak into the end of the first round. He also has some rushing ability, not like an elite runner, but kind of think Bo Nix this past year in terms of rushing ability. He has a really good arm. 3-year starter at Ole Miss. The downside is Mississippi is not the most translatable offense. My guess is he's going to take more snaps this week at the Senior Bowl under center than he did his entire college career.
Yeah.
So it's stuff like that, and he needs to be a little better at throwing with anticipation. But there's a lot of tools there. There's a lot of upside, and probably the best thing for him is if he's sitting. Now, some teams could get desperate. We see it every year. Maybe he does start a good bit. And so I'm kind of treating them the same. Like if I'm taking a 4th quarterback, I don't mind taking a shot at these guys. If I'm taking a 3rd, I need them. If I'm taking them as my 3rd, I need it to be, final rounds, and I need to have 2 very good guys ahead of them.
Okay. And then finally, let's do real quick on this, because I don't think either of these guys are going to have much starting upside this year, but Quinn Ewers, Texas, Will Howard, Ohio State. Are it sounds like you think both are going to be 2nd, 3rd round picks in the real NFL draft?
Yeah, likely 2nd, probably even more likely the 3rd round. So right now I'm probably not taking them. If some buzz really comes up ahead of the draft and it sounds like they're skyrocketing, then maybe I get into them late in the big board. And now if they end up with the good draft capital and a good landing spot and some good coach speak that they might have an opportunity as rookies, then sure, when we get to, the BBM and all those types of things, maybe I'm reevaluating. But right now, even with 20 rounds, I'm not really drafting them. But just 2 guys I wanted to keep an eye on, just in case they start like having great, buzz around them, particularly after the combine.
And Will Howard is down at the Senior Bowl as well?
I believe he is. And he can't remember. I know he was originally supposed to, but then there's a bunch of guys who didn't go at the very end. So
Oh,
he might.
okay. Yeah, I know from the running back position, you said Scatterboo pulled out. So there's guys that kind of dropped out at the very end for the Senior Bowl. Oh, sorry, Steve's coughing. Definitely fighting a cold and sick here. So I'll kind of until he's ready. Yeah, so yours, Howard, we put on here, but they're likely, definitely not someone you want to draft in big board now. Wait to see if there's more buzz as we get closer to the NFL draft. And then let's just move on to the tight ends. Cover boy, this is Tyler Warren, going to be tight end 1 in this year's draft. Could likely go, very high in the first round. Landing spot will, I know, be key for this for Warren. But I know Steve likes him a lot. Steve, are you ready to talk about Warren?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, no, Tyler Warren is an absolute fantasy potential stud. It's interesting. The last 2 years, a rookie tight end ended up as tight end 1 in half-point PPR.
Yeah.
Sam Laporta and Brock Bowers this past year.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is, the one thing that I really loved Sam Laporta 2 years ago was landing spot. He got to the Lions, a great offense, and just made a lot of sense. Bowers, not that I was totally out on him. I love the talent, but it was, oh man, Raiders are not the ideal landing spot, but it didn't matter. Somewhat due to Devontae Adams getting traded, but it just didn't matter. And talent rose to the top. So I think Warren, what I really like about him is where he's getting drafted, because he's getting drafted roughly the same area that Bowers was getting drafted last year. And, Laporta was ended up even slightly later, making him even greater value. But Warren is just incredible. 6'6", 255, 260-ish. He was quarterback in high school. So they'll use him for trick plays. He'll run the football. He had 200 plus rushing yards, which, you don't see from receivers, much less tight ends in college.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just going to be a major red zone weapon through the air, even on the ground in short yardage, trick plays, things of that nature. He'll probably, don't be surprised if he throws a touchdown or two. I absolutely think he'll get some tight end option, and sometimes even taking the ball from center. That's just how crazy his skill set is. So,
and a creative offensive coordinator could be like, "Hey, this big guy, we can use him in the tush push, similar to like you said, Mark Andrews did."
Absolutely. Unless it's like the Eagles or the Bills. Like, we've seen teams like Washington would bring in Mariota. They don't want to get Daniels hurt. Ravens don't want. Ravens and Packers didn't want Lamar and Love to get hurt, so they'd use a tight end. They'd use Anthony Kraft. So,
which I think is so smart. Yeah.
No, I think more and more teams will do that. But this is a tight end who actually knows how to run.
And do it well. Yeah.
And also he could actually do a fake tush push and throw the ball or something like that. Like, there's just more. Part of the issue with those tight ends is they don't take snaps from center.
Yeah.
Tyler Warren has. So he absolutely could be just a all-around fantasy stud. And where, like I said, where he's going 98.
Yeah.
If he ends up with a great landing spot, we talked pre-show, if, say, Ben Johnson with the Bears decides to upgrade from Cole Kmet with Tyler Warren, he got Sam Laporta a couple years ago, we could be talking wheels up for Warren's upside. So
and if he gets a good landing spot like a Ben Johnson or just any good landing spot, I mean, there's many of them that he could go to, because like you said, he's probably going to go in the first half of the first round, most likely. So if he gets a good landing spot, he will go up in the BBM in the classic contest after the NFL draft. I want to get my shares now. And by the way, I don't think he's going to move up to like where McBride and all the, and Bowers are, currently going. So I'll likely be high on him regardless. But definitely want to get my shares now. Any other thoughts on Warren before we go to the rest of them?
Yeah. Just kind of reiterating that what you just said, like, yes, he'll probably move up if the landing spot's good, but good or bad, I just think he's got a great chance. Even if he doesn't finish tight end 1, if he finishes a tight end 5, I don't think he's going to go up to be where tight end 5 is being drafted. So I think you're probably going to get value no matter what.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. I'm definitely all in on Tyler Warren for sure. Number 2 and 3, Colston Loveland, Michigan, Harold Fannin Jr., Bowling Green. Again, we're taping this Thursday night of Senior Bowl week. I've seen a lot of clips of Harold Fannin Jr. Why don't you talk about these two, Steve?
Yeah. So Loveland, been in Michigan the last couple of years, or been in Michigan through his career. Split time, last year with Barner, um, and then this year had more of a full starting role. But of course, Michigan's passing game went way down without JJ McCarthy.
Mm.
Uh, so his numbers are not going to wow you on the same level that uh, like two guys he sandwiched between Warren and Fannin will. But what he does bring is good size. Um, good route running. He can be dynamic after the catch. In some ways, he reminds me of a Travis Kelsey.
Mm.
Just a smart route running tight
Yeah.
end, knows how to get open.
Knows how
Gets
to find the holes in the
Yeah,
zone and
fine.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I see a little Kelsey in his game, and might not hit day one. I think he'll be a starter. He's a guy who he's going to be drafted late first round, early second round. Um, a team should be making him starter day one. It could, some rookie ramp up because he's an underclassman and, yeah, he split some work at Michigan up until this year. But yeah, I think he'll be a guy down the stretch for you who's making plays.
Okay. So you're definitely in on drafting Loveland in big
Yeah.
board then. All right,
And where
Harold.
he is, I didn't write down his ADP here, but I love him at where his ADP is because I feel like he's like some of the other tight ends in that area, um, to me, don't have the upside that he brings to the table.
Right. Love that. Next two I know for sure are doing well down at the Senior Bowl. Harold Fanning Jr. from Bowling Green, and I've read about Elijah Araro from Miami. Talk about both of them and how you're handling them in big board.
Yeah, Fannin Jr. first, definitely having a good Senior Bowl week. He's undersized, 6'3". I can't remember what he weighed, maybe 235, 240. So, he is not going to be your inline blocking tight end, but he is a dynamic receiving tight end. He had 1,300 receiving yards this year, led the nation in receiving yards. That's both receivers and tight ends. Um, Obviously played at a smaller school, Bowling Green, but he's showing that he can play at the Senior Bowl, which is obviously a good sign. Um, I think so. The key is landing spot is going to be key here because if it's a
Mm-hmm.
team that loves to run the football and wants to make him an inline tight end,
Mm.
he's not going to be good at that. But if it's a team with a dynamic playmaker who knows I want to get this guy open, um, then yeah, it could be very interesting. Look at how Evan Ingram has been used in the past. Look at how Jonnu Smith was
Jonnu
used
Smith this
last year.
year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Those are the types of tight ends that he's going to need to emulate.
Mm-hmm.
And so if he gets to the right scheme, right system, I'm a big fan. I'm thinking he's a second rounder, maybe third rounder. It is tough being a smaller school guy, undersized guy. He's definitely not going to fit every system. But
Mm-hmm.
if a team is looking to increase their tight end output, you want Fannin. If you're willing
Yeah.
to, be splitting him out and do stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's a little risk here with drafting him is he might not be a full-time starting tight end depending on the landing spot. But if he is, he could hit the ground running and be like a Jonnu Smith.
Well, right, and maybe that's for the builds in the big board. I've seen with 20 rounds, people draft 4 late round tight ends or 3 late
Yeah.
round. Certainly, I still like the 3 late round tight end approach, and maybe it's in something like that where you have 2 other ones that you can count on, but you're swinging for upside here in Harold Fannin Jr. Let's talk about Araro from Miami, and then Gunnar Helm. He's down at the Senior Bowl as well, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, talk about these two.
So Royo and Helm is exactly what you just said. Like they're gonna, and the thing is, you're meeting a couple rounds later even than Fannin. And if you're taking 4 tight ends or you 2 really solid ones, and you're taking this guy as your third, they are pretty much 1-year guys. Helm at Texas was behind Jatavian Sanders, so he didn't do
Mm-hmm.
much for this past year. And Arroyo's had injury concerns
Mm-hmm.
leading up to this year, and also big quarterback improvement with Ward there. He really had a breakout year. And they're both athletic guys. Helm is probably more complete tight end. Arroyo has probably a little bit more dynamic skill set. So it depends on what you're looking for. But I think they're both going to be 3rd, 4th round picks in the NFL draft. If you get the right landing spot, they could pay off big time for you. One thing that we have seen is there are a lot of teams that we've seen the tight end position fall off, and this is why rookies have led the league the last 2 years. There's a lot of teams with weak or bad tight ends or don't know how to utilize their tight ends, this is a draft class where even some of these mid-round guys like Fannin, Arroyo, Helm could end up as early starters. So I do think that there is upside here in a 20-round draft, even though we don't know where they're at. I don't mind taking a shot, but make sure you're doing so with the understanding that there's some risk here.
Yeah.
And I would only do it in 4 tight end builds or, 2 really good ones ahead of them, and then one of these 2.
Third late flyer with them. Okay, we've got 3 more to talk about. Oronde Gadsden from Syracuse. And then the last 2 we could probably be pretty quick on because not sure you're drafting those 2 as
much. The interesting thing is all 3 of these guys are NFL bloodlines. Oronde Gadsden, his dad was a receiver for the Dolphins. Mason Taylor, his dad was a defensive lineman for the Dolphins, and Uncle Zach Thomas. And then Luke Lachey, his dad was Jim Lachey.
Washington.
Washington left tackle for
Super Bowl. Yeah.
And
and an Iowa tight end. That's a tight end factory.
So I will say all are getting drafted, seemingly kind of getting drafted in the big board, and I would definitely only take them again in like 4 tight end builds or very, very secure with your top 2 guys.
Yeah.
But there's an interesting thing to all of them. Gadsden is probably a receiver. He actually bulked up, or he was at the East West Shrine game. He actually bulked up and weighed in at like 240 some. I'd be surprised if he played this past year at 220. So is he going to keep that weight? We'll need to see. The interesting thing is NFL teams could see him as a receiver. We see NFL teams turn tight ends or receivers to tight ends, but we could actually see the opposite here where he's listed in Underdog's ranking. This is almost like a Taysom Hill cheat.
Yeah.
He's listed as a tight end, but he does other things.
Interesting.
It's going to take the right landing spot. It's going to take the right team to see that. He's not going to be a tight end who's, again, in line and starting full time, but he's interesting enough. He had 1 injury field year, but 2 very productive receiving years. One as a tight end, one as a receiver. So we'll see how the NFL treats him. Just a guy to keep an eye on, especially with if he was listed as a receiver, he wouldn't be on our radar as much. But as a tight end, you could get some real value here. Mason Taylor really came on this year. Again, the NFL bloodlines, the size helps. He's a good receiving tight end, just not super dynamic. But I wouldn't be surprised if he is overdrafted, just given the NFL connections. And we've just seen growth and upside in his game. So there's a lot to like there. Kind of the same with Luke Lachey. Injuries were a factor with Iowa. He didn't get the chance to fully. In fact, his best year was playing second fiddle to Sam Laporta 2 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But Iowa hasn't been the most dynamic offense, but they do produce tight ends, and he does have NFL bloodlines. He's got good size. My guess is he's more of a developmental project guy, but he's the type of guy who, and George Kittle did this, and he was still drafted in the 5th round, but he really blew up at the combine because he was just so fundamentally sound.
Gotcha.
And Luke Lachey, with his bloodlines, with the Iowa pedigree, could do similar. And if he ends up being drafted as a 4th rounder, maybe he gets a starting shot.
So you, like you said, you see him as a day 3 guy for sure. And it's just, if the landing spot's right, maybe he gets a shot. But for both Lachey, Taylor, and any, I know Gadsden, like you said, he's a great in that like 4 tight end build or 2 solid. And he's my third late third tight end. But for Taylor and Lachey at this point of the big board draft, so you kind of not really touching them, but if we get more buzz later, you might.
20th round flyer. If I end up with 2-3% of them, I'm fine with that. I'm not going to overdraft them or anything like that. But I'll probably wait more until some news comes out, because even if positive news comes out, like at the combine, I don't think they're going to skyrocket up boards.
Yeah. Well, just like we look at BBM, drafts and ownership percentage, total ownership percentage. I suppose something like this, you might be able to get a flyer that if it fell perfectly right, even as a 4th round pick, they fell to a team that they were able to make an impact, on or do something, anything that, maybe they have a couple spike weeks that can help you in the big board contest specifically and be lower owned or something. So I get that. Like you said, it's 20th round type guys that you're taking if you have a very, very two solid tight ends ahead of them, or a 4 tight end build or something like that. So I think it's important to add that context to it, but this helps. So again, just to reiterate Steve's rankings. Now, one quick question on the quarterbacks. Have you, based on what's going down in Mobile at the Senior Bowl, are you flipping Milroe and Dart at all in your rankings, or are you sticking with
once the week's over? I probably will.
Okay. Gotcha.
Assuming
So
it continues, yeah.
It's assuming it continues. Okay. So you use Cam Ward from Miami 1, Short Sanders, Colorado 2. Possibly it's going to move to Jackson Dart, Mississippi 3, Milroe, Alabama 4, Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, more just to keep an eye on them at 5 and 6. Then tight ends, Tyler Warren, wheels up. We love him and are drafting a lot of him. Colston Loveland, Harold Fannin Jr., you like a lot at 2 and 3. Araro and Helm and Gadsden, you like a lot, again, specifically in those 4 tight end or 3 tight end builds with the 2 strong tight ends ahead of them. And then the Mason Taylor and Luke Lachey, 7 and 8, kind of, keeping an eye, might sprinkle a couple percent. Yeah. Any final thoughts for the people, Steve, before we get out of here after our first rookie of many preview? Next week, we'll do running backs. The week after, we'll do receivers. And then, probably do some other rookie shows before the big board's over. And then, stay tuned after the draft. We'll be sure to do this all again to talk about their landing spots. Any final thoughts on quarterbacks and tight ends? You kind of gave good context to it at the beginning, that not a strong quarterback class, pretty strong tight end, interesting tight end class.
So the one thing I'll say, and Warren might be the one exception to this, is generally with rookies, particularly before we know landing spots, I don't want to go vastly overweight on anyone. And that's going to even be true somewhat with running backs and receivers, though there's obviously more top end talent at those positions. But just, landing spots do matter a lot in general. I mean, there are guys who can be exceptions to the rule, but that's why even a guy like Loveland, who I'm a big fan of, I'll probably be right around the field, 8, maybe 10%. Not crazy. So there's going to be a few exceptions to that. Warren will probably be one. Hint, Ashton Genty might be one when we get to running back. But as fun as it is to draft rookies, especially until you know the landing spot, I just wouldn't go too crazy.
And there was, again, we've talked about this. We just did a show. Check it out. 2024 lessons learned. I've had a lot of good conversations with you and me and Andrew and Justin. There's a lot of ways to win in best ball. There's no hard and fast rules. And you were the 4th place big board 2024, 150K. And you had, I believe, 3 or 4 rookies. One was massive for you in Ladd McConkey. Yeah, that was huge. The other 2 were, I believe, fine, but Ladd McConkey was massive for you. The guy who won had 10 rookies. There's other guys that had somewhere in between, probably people that had less. There's just no hard and fast rules to the big board and how many rookies. I'd say certainly maybe lean into the positions where it's stronger, like running back and tight end. And just like last year, you leaned into heavier, Brian Thomas and Ladd McConkeys of the world. And, I know you drafted a lot of like Caleb and Jaden Daniels and quarterbacks too, because last year was strong quarterbacks and receivers. This year is strong running backs and tight ends. So keep, context always matters, and, don't make any hard and fast rules. And I think keep all that in mind too. So we'll be back next week talking running backs. In the meantime, be sure to check out all the great content on fanspeak.com, the Fanspeak Network. Be sure you're subscribed, of course, to the Fanspeak Network. And we have plenty of live drafts and strategy shows coming your way. And a best ball subscription launching in March. So stay tuned for all that good stuff. Thank you so much for joining us. For Steve, I'm Meg, and we will see you next time.